You don't deserve a single cent of what your grandfather built. You never did. My father said that to me on a Tuesday afternoon in November, standing in the kitchen of the house I grew up in, holding a stack of legal documents like they were evidence at a trial. His voice was calm. That was the part that scared me most. Not yelling, calm. The way he gets when he's already decided something and there's nothing left to discuss. I was 31 years old. I'd driven 4 hours from Cincinnati to attend what I thought was a routine family meeting about my grandfather's estate. My grandfather had passed 6 weeks earlier, quietly, in his sleep, the way good people sometimes get to go. He was 84. He had built a modest but real fortune through 40 years of owning a chain of hardware stores across rural Ohio, the kind of stores that actually knew your name when you walked in. He had told me, more than once, sitting on his porch with sweet tea going warm in our hands, that he wanted me taken care of. "You're the one who checks on me," he used to say. "The others show up for holidays." He wasn't wrong. My brother, I'll call him what he is, the golden child, had maybe visited our grandfather 4 times in the last decade. My aunt, my father's younger sister, had visited even less. But both of them were in that kitchen with my father when I arrived, and the way they looked at me when I walked through the door told me everything before anyone said a word. The 3 of them had the same expression. The kind you wear when you've rehearsed a conversation. I set my bag down by the door. I didn't hug anyone. Something in the air made me not want to. My father slid the documents across the kitchen counter toward me. "We need to talk about Grandpa's wishes," he said. I looked at the papers. The word amendment jumped out at me immediately. Then the date, 4 months before my grandfather died. "What is this?" I asked. "It's an updated trust document," my aunt said. She was perched on the kitchen stool like she owned it, picking at her thumbnail. "Your grandfather made some changes before he passed. He never mentioned any changes to me." "He didn't have to mention them to you," my brother said from the corner. He had his arms crossed and wouldn't quite meet my eyes. That told me he was ashamed of something, which meant he still had enough conscience left to feel it, just not enough to act on it. I picked up the document and started reading. The original trust, the one my grandfather had shown me 3 years earlier when he asked me to be the secondary executor, had split his estate 4 ways: my father, my aunt, my brother, and me, equal shares. The hardware store chain, the property, the savings, all 4 ways. The amendment removed my name entirely. My share, roughly $340,000, had been redistributed between my father and my aunt. My brother had been left untouched. I set the papers down very slowly. I'm a paralegal. I've been working in a family law office for 6 years. I know what trust documents are supposed to look like. I know the language, I know the signatures, and something about the signature block at the bottom of this amendment was already making my stomach drop before I could even articulate why. "I want a copy of this," I said. "It's not really your document too. I want a copy of this," I said again, and my voice came out so flat and so even that my brother actually stopped talking mid-sentence. My father looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "You were always too emotional about money. Your grandfather wanted things simplified. He told me the opposite. He told me specifically that he wanted me included." "People change their minds, not when they have dementia," I said. The room went very quiet. My grandfather had been diagnosed with early-stage vascular dementia 14 months before he died. It was documented, his neurologist had noted it, our family knew. And this amendment was signed, allegedly, 10 months into that diagnosis. My father's jaw tightened. He had good days. Then I'm going to need to see the documentation of a good day where he sat with an attorney and voluntarily redrew his trust to cut out the granddaughter who spent every other weekend with him for the last 4 years. I picked up my phone. I'm also going to need the name of the attorney who drafted this. My aunt stood up. "You're being hysterical." "I'm being a paralegal," I said. "There's a difference." I took photos of every page of that document with my phone before anyone could stop me. My father started to reach for it and I stepped back and kept photographing. He said my name in his warning voice, the same voice from when I was 12 and stayed out past curfew, and I looked at him and felt something shift inside me. Not break, shift, like a gear changing. This was not my father having a hard time after losing his father. This was my father having successfully executed a plan. I drove to a gas station 2 miles away and sat in the parking lot and called my boss. She picked up on the second ring. I explained what I had. She told me to send her the photos immediately and not to sign anything, not to agree to anything, not to go back into that house without recording the conversation if I legally could in Ohio. Ohio was a one-party consent state. I drove back to the house with my phone in my coat pocket, recording. What I got in the next 40 minutes would later become the foundation of a legal challenge that took 8 months but ultimately succeeded, but I didn't know that yet. I just knew I needed to keep them talking. I walked back in like I had cooled down. I apologized for my tone, it tasted like chalk, and said I just wanted to understand everything properly. My aunt visibly relaxed. My father nodded like he'd expected this. My brother got himself a glass of water. People who have done something wrong relax when they think you've surrendered. That's the thing about people like my father. He spent my whole life being the smartest person in whatever room he's in, and he genuinely could not imagine that I might have a plan. I asked questions. I asked them slowly, like I was still processing. Who was the attorney? A man named, well, I'll call him the family attorney, because his name is in court records now and I don't need to put it here. He was a solo practitioner my father had used for business matters for 15 years, not an elder law specialist, not someone with expertise in trust amendments for clients with cognitive decline. I asked how the meeting with my grandfather had been arranged. My father said my grandfather had expressed a desire to revisit his estate plan. Expressed it to you? I asked. To both of us, my aunt said, glancing at my father. Was anyone else present when he expressed this? Pause. He was clear about what he wanted, my father said. I'm sure he was. Was anyone else present? My brother made a sound that wasn't quite a word. I looked at him. His face was doing something complicated. He put his water glass down and stared at the counter. I wasn't there for that part, my brother said quietly. My father's head turned toward him so fast I thought he'd hurt himself. That was the moment I understood the shape of what had happened. My brother hadn't been in the room when whatever conversation, or manufactured conversation, had taken place. He'd been cut in on the reward without being made party to the crime. That was why he couldn't meet my eyes when I walked in. He suspected. He just hadn't said anything. I kept going. I asked about the notarization. The document had been notarized by someone whose name I didn't recognize. Not my grandfather's longtime attorney, who had drafted the original trust. Someone new. Who is this notary? I asked, holding up the photo on my phone. Does it matter? My aunt said. Legally, very much. She looked at my father. He looked at the window. Later, through discovery, we would learn that the notary was a woman who worked as a receptionist at the family attorney's office and had been notarizing documents for clients of his as a side arrangement for years, an arrangement that turned out to be the least of the problems with this document. The attorney, when deposed, would initially claim my grandfather had been lucid and engaged at the signing. Then our attorney introduced the neurologist notes from the same month, which described my grandfather as experiencing significant word-finding difficulty and occasional disorientation to time. The family attorney changed his characterization to, there were some slow moments, but overall he understood the nature of the document. Our attorney asked him if he had experience with dementia assessments. He did not. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That was 8 months later. That afternoon in the kitchen, I wrapped up my questions, thanked them for explaining, said I would need some time to process everything, and left. I did not cry until I was back on the highway with the recording running, and even then it was only for about 4 minutes. Then I called my husband. This is the part I want to be clear about, because I've talked to people since who went through similar things and made the mistake of keeping their spouse in the dark. My husband knew everything within 2 hours of my leaving that house. I pulled into a rest stop. I called him and I told him every single detail while he listened without interrupting until I was done. He said 3 things. Are you safe? And then, okay. And then, tell me what you need. That's who you call. That's who you need beside you for what comes next. What came next was a meeting with an elder law attorney, not my boss who referred us out appropriately, a specialist in trust litigation in Columbus. She reviewed the photos of the document within 24 hours and called me back with a tone of voice that I can only describe as professionally restrained excitement. She said there were several issues she wanted to explore. The timing of the amendment relative to the dementia diagnosis, the choice of attorney, someone without elder law experience, the absence of any independent witness to my grandfather's expressed wishes, the identity and qualifications of the notary. She also asked me something I hadn't thought to consider. Did your grandfather have a primary care physician he saw regularly? He did. He'd been seeing the same doctor in Dayton for 11 years. I'd like to request those records, she said. With your authorization, since you were named secondary executor in the original trust. That authorization, it turned out, was still valid. The original trust naming me secondary executor had never been legally superseded, because the amendment, and this is the part where everything starts to unravel, the amendment had a problem with the trustee's signature. The original trust had named a professional trustee, a small trust company in Columbus my grandfather had chosen specifically because he didn't want family members controlling the purse strings during distribution. Any amendment to the trust required the signature of that trustee's authorized representative. The signature on the amendment was there. It looked right. But when our attorney contacted the trust company to notify them of pending litigation, their compliance officer said something that made our attorney call me on a Saturday morning. The person whose name appears on that signature line has been on medical leave since March, she said. They did not sign any documents during that period. The trust company has no record of authorizing this amendment. Someone had forged the trustee's signature. I sat with thought for a long moment. Then I said, who would have had access to the original trust documents to even know whose signature to forge? That's an excellent question, my attorney said. My father had been named executor of my grandfather's day-to-day affairs 18 months before his death, when the dementia diagnosis made it practical to have someone managing bills and appointments. He had the original trust documents. He had the name of the trustee. He had access. We filed the legal challenge 3 weeks after my kitchen visit. I called my father the day before we filed, because my attorney advised it and because some part of me needed to do it. He picked up on the third ring. I told him what we had found. I told him about the trustee's signature. I told him about the notary. I told him about the medical records we had obtained showing my grandfather's cognitive state at the time of the alleged signing. He was quiet for a very long time. Then he said, "You're going to tear this family apart." And I said, "You did that. I'm just the one naming it." He hung up. 3 days after we filed, my brother called me. It was 11 at night and I almost didn't pick up. He sounded like he hadn't slept. He said he needed to tell me something. He said that the month before the amendment was signed, he had overheard a phone call between my father and the family attorney. He hadn't understood what they were discussing at the time. He said he'd been telling himself it was nothing. He said he was sorry. I asked him if he would say that to our attorney. He said yes. My brother's statement, taken formally with his own independent counsel present, described the phone call, the date, the substance of what he'd heard. It corroborated our timeline. It confirmed that the amendment had been initiated by my father, not by my grandfather. My father's attorney attempted to negotiate a settlement twice over the following months. My attorney presented both offers to me and I declined both. The first offer was to restore my original quarter share. The second was to restore my share plus legal fees. I declined those because the issue was no longer just about money. The issue was that someone had forged a signature on a legal document, had exploited an 84-year-old man with dementia, and had expected me to simply accept a stack of papers handed across a kitchen counter and drive back to Cincinnati. The case was resolved without going to trial, but only barely, and only because my father's attorney apparently made clear to him that the forged trustee signature was not a technicality that could be argued away. The trust company had no record, the authorized representative had medical documentation of their leave, and the handwriting analysis we commissioned was not favorable to my father's position. My grandfather's original trust was restored, my quarter share was reinstated. My father and aunt's portions were reduced accordingly. The family attorney lost his license. That came later, through a separate bar complaint. But it came. The notary situation was referred to the county prosecutor's office. I don't know what ultimately happened there, and I've made my peace with not knowing. My father has not spoken to me since the day the restoration was finalized. My aunt sends occasional emails that I read and don't answer. My brother and I talk. It's careful, tentative, the way things are when you've both seen what your family is capable of, and neither of you quite knows how to hold that. But we talk. That's something. There's a thing people say about family disputes over money, that no amount of inheritance is worth destroying your relationships over. I used to believe that. I believed it right up until I understood that the relationships had already been destroyed, long before I walked into that kitchen. The destruction just hadn't been made visible yet. My grandfather left me something he probably didn't intend to. The knowledge of exactly what I was willing to fight for. Not the money. Though the money mattered, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. What I was willing to fight for was the truth of what he had actually wanted. He had sat with me on his porch. He had told me I was the one who showed up. He had written it down in a legal document with proper counsel and proper process and proper signatures. That was real. Everything my father built on top of it was paper. I keep one photo from my grandfather on my desk at work. It's from the last summer before his diagnosis, the two of us at a county fair in Darke County, him holding a funnel cake he was entirely too proud of. He's laughing with his whole face. He looks like himself. That's who I went to bat for. And I would do it again without a second thought. I think about that kitchen counter a lot. The way my father slid those documents across it like he was handing me a bill to sign, not a verdict he'd spent months engineering. There was no hesitation in him. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the betrayal itself, but the ease of it. What happened to my family didn't start with greed. It started with something quieter, the slow belief that no one would look closely enough. My father counted on the assumption that I would see a stack of legal papers, feel overwhelmed, feel outnumbered and drive home. He had done the math on my compliance. He had been doing that math my whole life, but he forgot something. He forgot that the people who actually show up, the ones who drive 4 hours on a Tuesday, who sit on a porch in the heat, who call to check in not because they expect something in return, but because they genuinely care, those people tend to pay attention. They notice things. They remember. And when the moment comes, they know exactly what they're looking at. I was a paralegal. I had spent 6 years reading documents that people signed without understanding. I knew what a trust was supposed to look like. I knew what a forged signature meant. My father had spent years watching me be the quiet one, the one who kept the peace, and he mistook that for weakness. He didn't understand that some people are quiet because they're still deciding. And when they decide, they're already 3 steps in. What carried me through those 8 months wasn't anger, even though the anger was real. It was something more disciplined than that. It was the commitment to doing things the right way. Gathering evidence before making accusations, consulting the right professionals, following the legal process, even when it was slow and expensive and exhausting. There is a version of this story where I showed up at my father's door screaming. That version ends with nothing. The version where I walked back into that kitchen calm with my phone recording and my questions ready. That version ended with the truths in a court record. My brother surprised me. I think he surprised himself too. He had known something was wrong and had stayed silent, and I understood why. It's terrifying to go against your own parent, especially one who has always controlled the room. But when he finally made that call, when he gave his statement with his own attorney present, he did something that I think will define him for the rest of his life more than almost anything else he'll ever do. He chose what was right over what was safe. That's not a small thing. That's the whole thing. My grandfather is still on my desk. Funnel cake, county fair, Darke County, laughing with his whole face. I went to bat for what was real. And the thing about real is, it holds up.